Black CEO watches employee take leftovers. What he finds at her house leaves him speechless. It was nearly 9 p.m., and the last few employees were trickling out of the glass and steel high-rise that housed Monarch Tech's global headquarters in downtown Chicago. The night skyline shimmered through the wide windows of the 34th floor, where the executive suite was still lit. Most of the corporate bigwigs had already gone home. All except one. Inside the corner office, Darius Langston, CEO and co-founder of Monarch Tech, stood silently, his tall frame silhouetted against the glowing skyline. He was a man known for presence as much as for his power. At 43, with his salt and pepper fade, dark tailored suits, and a reputation that commanded boardrooms coast to coast, Darius wasn't someone easily rattled. But tonight something had caught his eye. Or rather, someone. He had stayed behind to finalize a confidential acquisition strategy that was to be unveiled next week. But through the slightly ajar blinds of his office, he noticed movement in the break room down the hall. Curious, he stepped out quietly and watched. At the far end of the corridor, a woman, early 30s, short natural curls, wearing an oversized cardigan over her faded blouse, was carefully packing leftover food into small plastic containers. Not company catering, but the remains of a team meeting from earlier that day. Half-eaten pasta, some untouched chicken sandwiches, a fruit platter no one had touched. She moved with an odd kind of grace, checking over her shoulder now and then, as if making sure no one was watching. But she didn't see him. Darius recognized her, kind of. He didn't know her name off the top of his head, which was rare for him. But she worked in accounting or operations, somewhere far from the executive level. A face that passed him in the hallway, but never entered his world. He watched as she wrapped up the food, zipped her canvas tote, then carefully wiped the counters clean. No waste, no mess. Most employees would never do this. And certainly not this discreetly. He should have just gone back to his office. But something held him there. She turned to leave, heading toward the elevator. Impulsively, Darius followed. As he stepped into the elevator behind her, she startled, nearly dropping her bag. "Sorry," Darius said calmly. "Didn't mean to surprise you." The woman pressed herself against the elevator wall slightly, unsure whether to smile or panic. "No, it's fine. Just didn't expect anyone else to still be here." "I could say the same," he said. "Long day?" She hesitated. "Yeah. Just wrapping up some reports." Darius glanced down at the heavy tote slung over her shoulder. "Taking some of the leftovers?" Her lips parted slightly, caught between honesty and defense. Yeah. They were going to be tossed. Figured I'd take them home." "To eat?" "Some. The rest, for my kids." There was no shame in her voice. "Just matter of fact." Darius nodded slowly. "Smart not to waste." Silence filled the elevator as they descended. He studied her, not in judgment, but in curiosity. Her shoes were worn at the edges, her knuckles chapped from the cold. But her spine was straight, her gaze steady. "Sorry," she added suddenly. "If this is a problem." "I know it's probably not allowed." "I didn't say that," he replied, cutting in, but not unkindly. "What's your name?" "Vanessa. Vanessa Cole." "I'm on the financial services team." Darius extended a hand. "Darius." She hesitated, then shook it. Her grip was firm. Surprised him a bit. "I know who you are," she said with a slight chuckle, then added quickly, "I mean everyone does." They reached the lobby. The glass doors reflected their silhouettes as they stepped outside. A cold wind hit them. Darius paused again. "You're taking the L train at this hour?" She nodded. "Blue Line. It's not bad, just cold and, well, long." He opened his mouth to offer her a ride. But something about the way she turned her collar up, the determined set of her jaw, made him hesitate. She didn't want charity. She wanted dignity. "Well, good night then, Ms. Cole." "Good night, Mr. Langston." She walked away into the night. But Darius didn't go home. Not immediately. He stood outside the building for a moment, then pulled out his phone. "Marcus," he said when his driver picked up, "I need you to follow someone." He hesitated. "Not like that," he clarified. "Just make sure she gets home safe and tell me where she lives." Half an hour later, a message buzzed in. Address: 7320, West Madison, Apt 2B. Neighborhood: South Austin. Darius stared at the screen. South Austin wasn't dangerous, but it wasn't where most of Monarch Tech's employees lived. Not unless they had to. The next morning, Darius sat in the executive conference room, distracted through meetings, charts, and endless discussions about quarterly performance. But his mind wasn't in the room. At noon, he stepped out and told his assistant to clear the rest of his afternoon. An hour later, dressed in casual jeans and a hoodie he hadn't worn in years, he pulled up outside the listed address in a nondescript black sedan. No chauffeur. No flashy car. He climbed the worn steps of the old brick duplex. The hallway smelled faintly of detergent and old wood. Then he knocked. After a pause, the door cracked open. A small boy peered out. "Hi," the boy said. "Hey there," Darius replied, unsure what else to say. A moment later, Vanessa appeared behind the boy. Her eyes widened in disbelief. "Mr. Langston?" "I'm sorry," he said, lifting a hand. "This probably seems crazy. I know I shouldn't be here." She opened the door wider, cautiously. "What's going on?" I wanted to understand." She frowned, arms folded now. "Understand what?" "How someone who works 12-hour days at one of the most profitable tech companies in the country has to take home leftovers to feed her children." For a second, she looked like she might slam the door in his face. Instead, she stepped aside. "You want to understand?" "Come see." Inside, the apartment was small but spotless. 2 children sat on the floor with coloring books. A third baby slept in a portable crib. There was no dining table, just a counter with 2 stools. A heater hummed in the corner. On the counter were the containers from the night before. One was open, half a sandwich gone. "My husband passed 3 years ago," she said. "Cancer. We had insurance, but not enough. I went back to school at night, got my accounting degree while raising 3 kids. I got the job at Monarch last year. Thought maybe things would turn around?" Darius looked around, eyes heavy. "You never asked for help?" "I didn't think I needed to," she said quietly. "I thought if I worked hard enough, it would be enough." He didn't know what to say. For once, the CEO with all the answers was speechless. "I'm not the only one," she added. "There are others. Women in billing, guys in support. They work long hours, then go home to second jobs or take leftovers from meetings like it's normal. Because rent and groceries are a luxury now." He stood there, heart heavy. And for the first time in a long time, Darius Langston saw his company not from the top floor, but from the ground. From the floor where dignity was a quiet act. Where survival was wrapped in plastic containers and carried home at night. And he knew this wasn't going to end here. He had just opened a door. And behind it was a truth he hadn't been ready to face. But now that he had, he wasn't going to turn away. The next morning, Darius arrived at Monarch Tech earlier than usual. His assistant, Jenna, hadn't even clocked in yet. He walked into his office, locked the door behind him, and sat down heavily at his desk. His mind wasn't on market forecasts or mergers today. It was still stuck on the image of Vanessa's small apartment, on the quiet strength in her voice when she said, "I thought if I worked hard enough, it would be enough." He had heard countless elevator pitches and strategic briefings, but none hit as hard as her honesty. He replayed her words in his mind over and over, each time finding something new to chew on. His company, a company he had built from the ground up, claiming to be progressive and inclusive, was failing the very people who kept it running. That reality gnawed at him in a way nothing ever had. Darius pulled up the employee compensation records. Page after page, names and salaries scrolled across his screen. Vanessa's name popped up. Her title? Financial Services Coordinator. Salary? $42,750. Full-time. He clenched his jaw. With 3 kids, no partner, and the cost of living in Chicago. That wasn't a living wage. That was survival by thread. By 9 a.m., the office buzzed with life. Jenna peeked in. "You want coffee?" Darius shook his head. "Cancel my morning. I need the leadership team in the boardroom at 10. All of them." Jenna raised a brow but nodded. Understood. At 10 sharp, the top brass of Monarch Tech filed into the boardroom. COO, CFO, HR director, operations lead, and a few VPs. Everyone was half smiling, thinking this might be about the big reveal of the upcoming acquisition. Darius stood at the head of the table. No slideshow, no charts, just him, arms crossed, eyes scanning the room. "Do any of you know who Vanessa Cole is?" A few looked at each other, confused. Most shook their heads. "She works in financial services. She's been here almost a year, single mom, 3 kids. Yesterday I found her packing up leftover food from a team meeting, not because she's greedy, because it's dinner for her children." The room went silent. "I visited her home last night," Darius continued, his voice calm but heavy. "She lives in a tiny walk-up in South Austin. No dining table. 1 space heater for the whole apartment. And yet she shows up here every day, does her job, and asks for nothing." HR Director Martha cleared her throat. "With respect, Darius, employees aren't required to disclose personal—" "Spare me the policy talk," he cut in. "I'm not asking what's required, I'm asking what's right." "Her salary is within the range for her position," added Raj, the CFO, "and we offer benefits. Healthcare, paid time off. We're already more generous than the industry standard." "Industry standard doesn't mean much when your kid's going to bed hungry," Darius shot back. "What exactly are we standardizing? Struggle." There was a beat of silence. "Do you know how many people at this company are living like her? How many take leftovers home and pray the fridge holds out for the week? How many come in sick because missing a day means missing a meal?" The room shifted uncomfortably. "We say we're a family here," Darius said, voice tightening. "But when was the last time any of you spoke to someone 2 floors down? When did we decide a ping-pong table in the break room mattered more than paying people enough to live?" He paused, then looked squarely at Raj. "Starting today, I want a full audit of employee compensation, beginning with operations, support staff, and accounting. I want to know who's living paycheck to paycheck while we post record profits." Raj looked flustered. "That's a massive undertaking. And the board? I'll handle the board. And the press? I said I'll handle it." HR Director Martha leaned forward. "We'll need a strategy. If word gets out we've been underpaying." "We won't spin it," Darius said sharply. "We'll own it, and we'll fix it." Someone at the far end, Jared from marketing, raised a tentative hand. "Sir, are you sure this is the right time? Investors are watching. The market's volatile." "Announcing wage adjustments could trigger—" "This isn't about timing," Darius snapped. "It's about decency." The room was stunned. This wasn't the polished, composed CEO they were used to. This was personal, and it made them uncomfortable, which in Darius's mind meant they were finally paying attention. The meeting adjourned in tense silence. Later that day, Vanessa was at her desk, reconciling invoices when a message popped up on her screen. "Ms. Cole, Mr. Langston would like to see you in his office." Her heart jumped. She stood slowly, wiped her palms on her skirt, and made her way upstairs. When she entered, Darius was at his desk, sipping coffee. "Come in," he said, gesturing to the seat across from him. Vanessa sat down, eyes scanning the room like she was bracing for a reprimand. "I owe you an apology," Darius began. Vanessa blinked. "Sir, I followed you home." "That wasn't right. I crossed a line." She shifted in her seat. "You wanted to understand." "I respect that," he nodded. "Still, I could have asked." "You deserve that respect." She nodded once but said nothing. Darius leaned forward. "I also want to say thank you for waking me up." "I didn't do anything." "You did more than you know." There was a long pause. He looked at her, not as a CEO to an employee, but as a man who had seen something he couldn't unsee. "You're not alone, are you?" he asked softly. She shook her head. "Not even close." He leaned back, thoughtful. "Then it's time I do something about that." Vanessa hesitated, then asked, "Why now?" He looked her in the eye. "Because change doesn't start at the top floor. It starts when someone with nothing left to give takes home a cold sandwich and calls it dinner." Vanessa's eyes glistened, but she didn't cry. She just nodded. And for the first time since her husband's death, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Seen. And maybe, just maybe, hopeful. The storm didn't hit right away. It never does. Not in corporate America. But by midweek, word had quietly started spreading. Rumors swirled like smoke through the hallways of Monarch Tech. Whispers over coffee, glances passed during elevator rides, slack threads that disappeared as soon as managers entered the room. Something was happening upstairs. And no one knew exactly what, only that it started after the CEO had an unexpected meeting with someone from financial services. By Thursday, HR had begun pulling employee files. Anonymous surveys were sent out. Department heads were asked to provide salary justifications and retention risk analyses. On the surface, things looked the same, but deep down, everyone could feel the shift. Vanessa Cole felt it most of all. That morning, she sat at her desk trying to finish a budget report, but her inbox kept pinging with emails from people she barely knew. Messages like, "Hey, I heard you talked to Langston. Is it true he's revamping pay?" Or more cautiously, "Did you complain?" Not judging, just trying to understand. Vanessa didn't respond to any of them. She couldn't, because the truth was, she didn't know what this was turning into. And she wasn't sure how to feel about it. Then came the meeting request, not from Darius this time. From Rhonda Wilkins, director of HR, a woman with a reputation for velvet gloves and iron fists. Vanessa stared at the invite. Friday, 3 Sao p.m. No subject line. She felt her stomach drop. When the time came, she walked into the glass office on the 20th floor, where Rhonda was already waiting. Hair pulled into a severe bun, nails immaculate, smile razor-thin. "Ms. Cole, have a seat." Vanessa sat, hands folded tightly in her lap. "We wanted to touch base regarding a few changes that may have been prompted by your recent interaction with Mr. Langston." "I didn't file a complaint," Vanessa said quickly. I know, Rhonda replied, tone crisp. That's not why you're here. This is more of a courtesy meeting. Vanessa narrowed her eyes. Courtesy? Rhonda leaned back, steepling her fingers. There's a lot of chatter. Some of it very disruptive. Mr. Langston's sudden interest in individual employee circumstances has created uncertainty. Vanessa said nothing. We need to be careful, Rhonda continued. Optics matter. We can't have employees thinking one personal anecdote is enough to change company policy. Vanessa's voice came out quieter than expected, but sharp. One personal anecdote? Rhonda offered a tight smile. You understand what I mean. No, Vanessa said, firmer now. I really don't. Rhonda's expression tightened. I'm saying that while your situation is unfortunate, it doesn't necessarily represent a trend. Vanessa blinked slowly. Do you want to come to South Austin and tell that to the woman in billing who picks up shifts at Walgreens? Or maybe Marcus from IT, he works nights driving Uber. Rhonda shifted in her seat. This isn't about them. This is about managing perception. We're asking you to remain discreet. Vanessa held her gaze, heart pounding. You're asking me to be quiet. Rhonda didn't deny it. After a long silence, Vanessa stood up. Let me be clear. I didn't ask for this. I didn't go looking for pity. He followed me. He saw my life, and he made a choice. And if that makes you uncomfortable, maybe that's the problem. She turned and walked out without waiting for permission. That night, Darius sat alone in his office again. The city stretched out behind him in shimmering orange and blue. He had just gotten off the phone with a journalist friend at the Chicago Ledger. They had caught wind of internal changes at Monarch and wanted a quote. He hadn't given them one. Not yet, but the pressure was mounting. Board members were calling. Investors were asking questions. Some were concerned, others were furious. As if to confirm that thought, his phone buzzed again. This time it was an internal message. Urgent. Request for emergency board session, Monday 9 a.m. He sighed and leaned back in his chair, eyes closed for a moment. It wasn't lost on him that the very people demanding explanations now were the ones who had praised him for visionary leadership when he cut costs last year by automating the mailroom and outsourcing janitorial contracts. But those weren't just line items. They were livelihoods. And now he was the one flipping the table. The next morning, Vanessa arrived to find a sticky note on her desk. Conference room 4B, 10 a.m. Bring your laptop. She walked in to find Darius already there. You okay? He asked as soon as she entered. I've been better. He nodded solemnly. HR gave you a hard time? She didn't answer. But the look on her face was enough. I'm sorry, he said. That shouldn't have happened. Vanessa sat down, shoulders tense. Look, Darius continued, I didn't expect this to move quietly, but I underestimated how quickly the system would push back. Vanessa arched a brow. You've been at the top for 20 years. You really underestimated that? He gave a wry smile. Touché. She sighed. What now? Darius pulled out a folder and slid it across the table. This is a pilot proposal. Tiered compensation adjustments based on cost of living, family status, and role relevance. Not just raises, but structural changes. Including emergency stipends and community grants. I want your input. Vanessa blinked. My input? I don't want a think tank of executives guessing what families need. I want someone who knows. Vanessa stared at the documents, heart thudding. You realize if you do this, she said softly, you'll make a lot of enemies. I already have, he replied. The question is, will I have allies too? She met his gaze, something flickering behind her eyes. I'm in. He smiled, this time with something real behind it. And as they leaned over the paperwork together, two very different worlds began to collide. One from the corner office, one from the crowded apartment in South Austin. But in that moment, they weren't CEO and employee. They were just two people trying to build something better. And neither of them had any idea just how much resistance was still to come. Monday arrived with a tension so thick, it felt like the walls of Monarch Tech were holding their breath. The boardroom on the 25th floor was packed. 12 members seated in silence around a glossy oak table, expressions tight, tablets glowing softly in front of them. The skyline of Chicago shimmered beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, but inside the air was stale. Darius Langston walked in without a smile. No suit jacket, no pretense. Just the quiet, steady presence of a man who knew the storm he was walking into. "Thank you all for being here," he said as he sat down. Gerald Shaw, the oldest member of the board and longtime hedge fund veteran, didn't waste time. "Darius, care to explain what the hell is going on?" "I'm sure you've all heard the rumors," Darius said calmly. "Let me confirm them. I've initiated a pilot program focused on pay equity, employee wellness, and internal accountability. It's being built from the ground up with employee input." There was a pause before the room erupted. "You mean to tell us you've restructured internal compensation without board approval?" "You're exposing us to legal risk, Darius. This isn't a startup. We're not running a charity." Darius held up a hand, waited for the noise to settle. "I'm doing what I should have done 10 years ago," he said. "I saw one of our best employees scraping food into a napkin to feed her kids. I went to her house. I saw the reality we've ignored. And I'm not going to keep pretending this is acceptable." A woman at the far end, Meredith Kane, narrowed her eyes. "This is emotional overreach, Darius. It's not how a CEO leads. It's how an activist behaves." "I'm both," he replied, "and I'm done apologizing for it." Another voice chimed in, icy and controlled. Victoria Hensley, who chaired the audit committee. "If you proceed, we will need to consider a vote of no confidence." Darius leaned forward. "You can take that vote. But let me ask you something. What's your plan when this hits the press? Because it will. The world's changing. Our workers are watching. So are our customers. What side of history do you want your names printed on?" Silence fell. Then someone knocked at the door. A young assistant poked his head in, eyes darting. "Sorry to interrupt, but Ms. Cole is here. She says she was asked to attend." Whispers rippled through the room. "Send her in," Darius said. Vanessa walked in, composed, her usual workday attire replaced by a clean navy dress. She nodded politely to the board, then took a seat beside Darius. "I asked Vanessa to join because she's co-designing the program with me," he explained. "She represents a voice this room has ignored for too long." "You mean the voice of someone you felt sorry for," Gerald muttered. "No," Vanessa said quietly but firmly. "He means the voice of someone who's lived the cost of your decisions." Victoria turned sharply toward her. "And what qualifications do you have to redesign a corporate compensation model, Ms. Cole?" Vanessa didn't flinch. "Single mother of 2. Community college graduate. 14 years in this company, during which I've trained half of the junior analysts who now outrank me. I know how your policies affect real people because I've survived them." A beat. Then Darius added, "She also holds a certification in data analytics and has been shadowing operations for 6 months, which I authorized." Meredith leaned back, arms crossed. "You're playing a dangerous game, Darius." "No," he said. "I'm building a better one." Outside the boardroom, employees noticed the shift. Word spread that Vanessa had been seen walking out of the executive floor next to the CEO. Some cheered. Others worried what it meant. But in the days that followed, something changed. A town hall meeting was called. Darius and Vanessa stood together on the stage in the atrium, speaking openly about their new pilot program, not as a PR stunt, but as a statement of purpose. The next day, anonymous surveys were replaced with real conversations. Supervisors were required to submit pay structure reports. Employees could now file hardship appeals directly to a new internal equity board, headed by none other than Vanessa. But not everyone was cheering. In a quiet corner office, Rhonda Wilkins paced, phone pressed tightly to her ear. "You need to get control of this," she hissed. "He's undermining our protocols." "This girl, Vanessa, she's dangerous." The voice on the other end was cold. "Handle it, or we will." That afternoon, Vanessa received an email marked urgent. It was a formal notice requesting her presence in a compliance review. No reason, no sender name, just a room number and a time. She stared at it for a long moment, then picked up her phone. "Darius," she said when he answered. "They're coming for me." His voice was calm, but edged with steel. "Let them try." And somewhere behind layers of power and silence, old forces began to awaken. Because systems don't break without resistance. And the more truth you bring to light, the deeper the shadows push back. The compliance review room was stark and silent, tucked in a remote corner of Monarch Tech's headquarters. No windows, just a long rectangular table, gray carpet, and a projector screen humming faintly in the background. Vanessa sat alone for 10 minutes before the door opened. Rhonda Wilkins entered first, heels sharp against the floor, followed by two members of the legal and HR departments. One of them, a wiry man named Stephen Marks, avoided Vanessa's gaze. The other, Julia Tran, looked uncomfortable, but said nothing as she took her seat. "Ms. Cole," Rhonda began with that all-too-familiar condescension. "This isn't a disciplinary meeting yet, but it is serious. We have concerns about the integrity of your sudden promotion and your unauthorized access to executive-level initiatives." Vanessa met her eyes, calm and composed. "Nothing I've done has been unauthorized. Darius brought me into this program himself." "Be that as it may," Rhonda said, "protocol matters. We need to evaluate if your actions, particularly accessing payroll data, were within your jurisdiction. There are confidentiality clauses in place for a reason." Vanessa tilted her head slightly. "You mean the same payroll data that shows dozens of women of color in entry-level roles being paid less than their white male counterparts with the same title?" Stephen shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Julia cleared her throat, glancing at the printed documents in her folder. "Vanessa, you've also been seen holding closed-door meetings with other employees during work hours. We've received anonymous complaints suggesting you've been encouraging dissent." "Dissent?" Vanessa raised an eyebrow. "You mean empowering people to speak up about injustice?" Rhonda narrowed her eyes. "This isn't activism hour. This is corporate America. And if you want to stay in that seat, you'll learn the difference." Vanessa sat still, not flinching. "And if I don't?" Rhonda leaned in slightly, her voice low. "Then I'll do what I should have done the minute I saw you stealing leftovers in the break room. I'll have you escorted out." The room fell into a thick silence. Then the door opened again. Darius stepped in, dressed in dark jeans and a gray blazer, face unreadable. He looked at each person in the room before settling his gaze on Rhonda. "I thought this was a meeting about compliance, not intimidation." "Darius," Rhonda said quickly, shifting in her chair, "we're simply investigating potential breaches in data access and conduct." "Really? Then where's the investigation into the manager who docked Vanessa's hours for picking up her sick daughter?" Or the executive who approved bonuses for friends while cutting entry-level pay? He pulled out a folder and tossed it on the table. You want to talk compliance? Let's talk all of it. Julia blinked, hesitating before slowly opening the folder. Her expression shifted as she skimmed the first few pages. Rhonda's face tightened. That's private company data. And I'm the CEO, Darius said flatly. It's mine to authorize. Vanessa, still seated, watched the scene unfold. She wasn't used to someone standing up for her like this. It rattled something inside her, something she hadn't let herself feel in a long time. Hope. Stephen stood awkwardly. I think perhaps we should reschedule this meeting pending legal review. No, Darius said. This meeting's over. And Vanessa won't be sitting through any more surprise reviews without my direct knowledge. The room emptied quickly after that. Vanessa followed Darius out into the hallway, the fluorescent lights above casting a sterile glow on their path. He turned to her when they reached the elevator. You all right? I think so, she said, exhaling slowly. Though I don't know how much longer I can keep playing defense. You won't have to, he replied. It's time to go public. Vanessa blinked. Public? Like press conference public? Exactly that, Darius said. We're calling in the media. We're putting faces to numbers, and we're going to let the world see what this company's really made of, from the ground up. Later that night, Vanessa sat alone in her apartment, the weight of the day settling in her chest. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from someone she hadn't heard from in years, her sister Nina. Saw you on the company live stream. Proud of you. Dad would have been too. Vanessa felt her throat tighten. But just as she began to type a reply, another message appeared. This one, anonymous. You think this ends with a press conference? You have no idea who you're messing with. She stared at the screen, heart thudding. Somewhere in the dark corners of Monarch Tech's powerful hierarchy, forces were beginning to stir. Not everyone was ready to let Vanessa Cole rewrite the rules, and some of them would stop at nothing to silence her. By Wednesday morning, the air at Monarch Tech was electric. Everyone had heard about the confrontation in the compliance review room. Whispers of what Darius had said, of how Vanessa stood her ground, had spread like wildfire through every floor, from interns to executives. No one was saying it out loud, but something seismic had shifted. Vanessa stood in front of the mirror that morning, adjusting the lapel of the blazer she'd borrowed from her sister. She looked at herself, not just the single mom hustling paychecks, but someone about to walk into the lion's den and call it by name. Her kids, Malik and Layla, had already left for school, but before Malik had gone, he stopped and said, "You're gonna be on the news, right?" She'd smiled. "Maybe. You think I'll look okay?" He grinned. "You'll look like the boss." By noon, the press conference was live. A podium had been set up in Monarch Tech's main atrium, flanked by banners with the company's logo. Behind Darius and Vanessa were several employees, black, brown, white, male, female, some in suits, others in uniforms. Real people, real stories. Darius stepped up first. "There's a story I need to tell you," he began. "Not about profits or stock prices, but about people. A few weeks ago, I saw one of our employees, Vanessa Cole, packing leftovers from the staff lounge. At first, I thought she was just saving them for later. What I found out after changed everything." He turned to Vanessa and stepped aside. Vanessa walked to the mic, hands steady despite the pounding of her heart. "My name is Vanessa Cole. I've worked here 14 years. I've raised 2 kids alone. I've picked up shifts no one wanted, trained people who passed me by, and watched the same policies push my friends out the door. A hush fell over the room as cameras zoomed in, flashing every few seconds. I didn't want sympathy. I wanted fairness. But when I spoke up, I was ignored. Until Mr. Langston came to my home, saw how we lived, and asked me to help build something better. So here we are, she gestured to the group behind her. These are the people helping redesign our company's foundation. We're not doing this for praise. We're doing this because we're tired of being invisible. Applause erupted from the gathered employees and even some of the reporters. It was raw, unpolished. But it was real. As the conference ended, Darius and Vanessa shook hands with staff, posed for a few photos, and walked into a side room where a small legal team was waiting, with nervous eyes and a flash drive. "There's something you need to see," Julia Tran said, pulling up a document on the screen. "It's an internal thread, encrypted, supposedly deleted, but IT managed to recover parts of it. Lines of emails appeared, their headers chilling. Subject: containing the Cole situation, from Rhonda Wilkins, to Internal Risk Management Group. We need to push back. If Cole gets too much visibility, this equity narrative spirals. Start compiling any past infractions. Missed shifts, policy violations, anything. If she won't back down, we'll break her credibility." Vanessa's face paled. They were building a case. "More than that," Julia added. One thread suggests they were preparing to leak information to external media, distorted out of context. They wanted to discredit the whole pilot program. Darius folded his arms, anger simmering beneath his calm. "How deep does it go?" "Deep," Julia said. "Some board members knew, and there's mention of financial bonuses tied to successful mitigation. They were going to get paid for silencing this." Silence fell over the room. Then Vanessa leaned forward. "Let it go public." Julia blinked. "Excuse me?" "Leak it," Vanessa said. "Let the world see the emails. The whole thing. Let them try to paint me as the villain. Let's see what people believe when they read the truth." Darius gave her a long, measured look. "That's going to make it ugly. They'll attack you personally." Vanessa smiled faintly. "I'm used to ugly. What I'm not used to is being able to fight back." That night, a whistleblower account on social media posted screenshots of the emails. The story blew up. By the next morning, it was trending nationwide. Hashtags like "Why Vanessa Was Right" and "Monarch Expose" flooded Twitter. Journalists picked up the leak within hours. Employees began sharing their own experiences under anonymous threads. Former workers spoke up. A quiet revolution ignited. Inside Monarch Tech, Rhonda Wilkins called an emergency board meeting. But things were already spinning out of her control. The HR head resigned that afternoon. Gerald Shaw released a statement distancing himself from the board's internal decisions. Victoria Hensley went dark. No comments to the press, no sightings in the building. And Vanessa, she was flooded with emails. Messages from strangers, notes from women in other companies, even a voicemail from an elderly former janitor who said, "You don't know me, but I watched you carry your baby to work one morning, and I knew you were going to do something big one day." But there was one message that struck deepest. An email, unmarked, with a subject line, "You're not done yet." Inside was a file, and what she saw next turned her stomach to ice. Because hidden inside that file was a document she was never meant to see. A secret committee proposal, one designed to phase out the pilot program within 3 months, citing budgetary inefficiencies. They were still coming, still trying to erase it all. And now Vanessa knew this wasn't just about her. This was about every voice like hers that had been buried for decades. And it was time to make the next move. The file Vanessa had received wasn't just an internal proposal. It was a blueprint for erasure. Quietly terminate the program. Realign resources. Reinstate the old evaluation system, all packaged in the language of corporate efficiency. Vanessa stared at the document late into the night, her laptop dimly glowing in the small kitchen where her children were already asleep in the next room. She reread one line over and over. Phase out pilot structures before quarter end. Avoid employee disruption. Mitigate PR risk. They were going to kill everything. Not with a bang, but with silence. And if she didn't act fast, no one would know until it was too late. By morning, she had a plan. Vanessa requested a private meeting with Darius. They met in his office overlooking the downtown skyline, the same room where, weeks ago, she'd stood silently waiting for a disciplinary report. This time, she carried her own files. And her voice. She dropped the printed documents onto his desk. "I know you're not behind this," she said. "But someone on the board is still pulling strings." Darius picked up the proposal and skimmed the highlighted sections. His expression darkened with each line. "This was never supposed to reach you," he said, shaking his head. "But it did," Vanessa replied. "And if they're moving now, we don't have much time." Darius looked up. "What are you thinking?" "I want a seat at the emergency board meeting. I want to speak." He hesitated. "Vanessa, they don't just let employees walk in and lecture shareholders." "I'm not going in as an employee," she said. "I'm going in as the woman who helped you start this thing. The one who built the team that saved your PR crisis, and the one whose story launched a national movement." She leaned forward. "If I don't speak, they'll bury the whole thing." He studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "All right, but if you're walking into that room, you need more than a speech. You need backup." And backup is what she got. In the next 48 hours, Darius and Vanessa assembled a coalition of current and former employees willing to go public. A legal rep, a data analyst, a logistics manager who had evidence that hiring practices were manipulated. They compiled stories, records, metrics showing improvement in morale and performance under the new equity-based pilot. By the time Friday arrived, the 23rd floor boardroom of Monarch Tech was packed. Darius opened the meeting with routine updates, but as he cleared his throat to segue, Rhonda Wilkins interrupted. "Before we go any further," she said, tone clipped, "I'd like to address the unauthorized leak of internal documents earlier this week. This breach of confidentiality threatens the stability of our company and undermines trust in leadership." Vanessa stood. "Then maybe leadership needs to earn that trust back." Every head turned. Rhonda's eyes narrowed. "Excuse me, Mrs. Cole. This meeting is closed to non-board members." "She's here with my full endorsement," Darius said calmly, "and you'd be wise to listen." Vanessa stepped forward. "You think phasing out the pilot quietly will save you money, but what's that really going to cost you? How many lawsuits? How many headlines? How many employees walking out because they know the truth?" Rhonda scoffed. "The truth. You're a cafeteria manager, Ms. Cole. You're not qualified to determine strategic viability." "No," Vanessa said, her voice rising. "But I'm qualified to tell you what happens when a single mom's promotion is denied 3 times while she trains every man who gets the job instead. I'm qualified to tell you what it feels like when your boss tells you, maybe if you smiled more, people would take you seriously." She dropped a folder of statements on the table, printed, signed, dated. "And I'm qualified to tell you that your silence is complicity." A moment of stunned stillness. Then Darius added quietly, "What she's saying is backed by data, and unless we want a class action lawsuit and an SEC investigation on our hands, we need to stop pretending like this is optional." Rhonda went pale. Gerald Shaw, usually unreadable, cleared his throat. I'd like to hear the full findings. Let's take a vote on allowing Vanessa to present. All hands went up, except Rhonda's. Vanessa spent the next 20 minutes walking through the pilot's successes. Concrete results: improved retention, increased applications from underrepresented groups, a 17% rise in internal promotions for women of color. She ended with a photo, her kid standing next to the homemade plaque from the Monarch Tech Community Day. It read, "Built by us. For all of us." "That's what this is," she said. "It's not about me. It's about every single person you never see because your elevator only stops at the executive floor." When she finished, there was silence again. But this time it was different. Heavy. Measured. Gerald leaned back. "We'll need to reconvene in 24 hours. This board will need time to review everything." "Ms. Cole, thank you for your courage." Vanessa stepped out of the room with her heart still racing. She didn't know if it would be enough, but for the first time, she wasn't walking out alone. In the hallway, a voice called after her. It was Rhonda. "You think you've won something?" Rhonda hissed. "But this isn't over." Vanessa turned to her, calm and clear-eyed. "No, it's just beginning." And as she walked away, Rhonda didn't follow, because the tide had already turned. The morning of the final board vote felt like a thunderstorm brewing beneath a clear sky. Tension was thick inside Monarch Tech's headquarters, though not a word of it was spoken aloud. Employees walked through the hallways aware that something big was happening, but no one quite knew what. Vanessa sat outside the glass-paneled conference room, waiting, not with fear this time, but a quiet, anchored determination. Inside, the board deliberated. And for once, Darius didn't shield them from the uncomfortable parts. He laid out everything: the original vision of the pilot program, the undermining attempts from within, and the blatant inequities they could no longer pretend didn't exist. "I'm not asking you to keep this pilot for sentimental reasons," he said. "I'm asking you to keep it because it works. And because if we let it die now, we send a message not just to our employees, but to the world, that doing the right thing only matters when it's convenient." A vote was called. When the door finally opened, Vanessa stood. Gerald Shaw walked toward her and extended his hand. "Congratulations, Ms. Cole." The board voted 7-2 in favor of continuing and expanding the pilot company-wide, effective immediately. She blinked. For a second, her breath caught in her chest. She had dared to hope, but now it was real. "Thank you," she whispered, then louder, "Thank you." But the victory didn't end there. Within days, the announcement hit the press. Monarch Tech was not only retaining its equity pilot program, but was also launching a nationwide initiative to support similar efforts in tech companies across the country. The story led with a headline that caught fire on social media. "From lunchroom to boardroom, how a single mom changed the culture of a tech giant." Requests for interviews poured in. The New York Times, CNN, Forbes. But Vanessa turned most of them down, choosing instead to appear on a local podcast hosted by a young black woman in Atlanta trying to build her own platform. "I didn't do this alone," Vanessa said on air. "I just did the part that was mine to do. And that's the thing, everybody has a part. Whether you're the CEO or the janitor, your story matters. Your fight matters." Meanwhile, fallout within the company was swift. Rhonda Wilkins was suspended pending internal review. 2 other board members quietly resigned. Policies were rewritten. Training became mandatory, not just the check-the-box kind, but real, deep systemic reviews. Darius stepped further into public leadership, now unapologetic in his stance on equity. Not as a branding move, but as a legacy. The cafeteria changed too. Vanessa didn't go back to managing it. She was promoted, formally, to head of employee equity initiatives, a newly created role with budget, staff, and autonomy. Her first project, a company-sponsored program to help hourly workers access leadership training and mentorship across departments. Her kids noticed the difference, too. One night, as she tucked her youngest, Jaden, into bed, he looked up at her and asked, "Mom, are you famous now?" She smiled. "No, baby, just loud." He grinned, pulled the blanket tighter. "I like it when you're loud." And in the quiet of that moment, Vanessa realized something important. The fight wasn't just for a promotion, or a boardroom, or a policy. It was for the dignity of being seen, heard, respected. Not just by executives, but by your own children, your community, and most of all, by yourself. Weeks later, she found herself standing in front of a group of young women at a community leadership event in Chicago. "You may think you need permission," she told them. "But you don't. You don't need someone to tap you on the shoulder and say, 'Now it's your turn.' Your turn is now. And the truth is, when we all show up, they can't ignore us forever." The room erupted in applause. And as the applause faded, Vanessa looked out over a sea of faces, black, brown, white, tired, determined, and knew the story didn't end here. It was just getting started. If this story moved you, inspired you, or even made you think twice, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories about real strength, quiet heroes, and the battles we fight every day for justice and dignity. Your voice matters, and together, we can make sure it's heard.